I started my research about 25 years ago when I studied RNA splicing as a mechanism that contributes to control of gene expression. And soon after I realized that I can manipulate it using the small fragments of nucleic acids like RNA or DNA, which we called oligonucleotides. And that by targeting oligonucleotides to elements that are important for splicing, I can manipulate this process with consequences that are clinically applicable. The first disease that I worked on was thalassemia, a genetic disease of blood disease, and later on muscular dystrophy, and that's because we found compounds that were in fact taken up by the muscles much more efficiently than other cells. So in the particular case of genetic diseases, the role of patients is very important for several reasons. One is that in fact the number of patients are very small, and therefore in order to do any kind of trial or any kind of research when it comes to the point where you can test your drugs on patients, it's important for the researchers and the companies to be able to find the patients. And anything that the parents' organizations or patients' organizations can do to facilitate it would obviously at the end benefit the patients and facilitate our work. The second role that the patients can play is in fact support financially, if they can, a research, especially early steps of the research, because usually the investors and or big pharmaceutical companies are not interested in supporting early stages of the research, especially if in the diseases where the number of patients is small and therefore the payoffs at the end will also are not tremendous. So another way for parents and patient organizations to help in the process of progressing from research to bringing the drugs on the market is to participate in the design of the trials, which are required by FDA in the United States and by EMEA in Europe. Both agencies, and rightly so, require double-blind placebo trials, and those require a large number of patients. Now, in case of rare diseases, which by definition are rare and therefore there's very small number of patients available or in fact affected, it's almost impossible to design trials that way. So there's a process going now, and I would certainly encourage all parents and patient organizations to participate in this process, how to better design trials that would allow drugs that are only targeted a small number of people on the market and somehow to deal with the issue of large trials that are regularly required. At the beginning of my career, as I mentioned, I worked on thalassemia, and I was invited to a conference on thalassemia organized by International Thalassemia Society, and International Thalassemia Foundation. And there, for the first time, I met young patients with thalassemia, who, after listening to my talk, at that time, it was a very early steps of my research, where we still were working in vitro, in other words, in test tubes. They would come to me and ask me, Dr. Kole, how long is it going to take you to make a drug? And if I told them that's going to be, say, 5, maybe up to 10 years, they were devastated. They were asking, am I going young, and I be still eligible? Am I be still able to be treated with a drug? As you can imagine, that was a very motivating experience, realizing that every month, every day, every week counts in the lives of these patients. And again, recently, in fact last year, I met at a conference organized by another patient organization, Parent Project for Muscular Dystrophy, PPMD, where I also met parents and patients, boys who are already in wheelchairs, and of course the same question was raised, and the same boost to motivation of our work was evident from their questions. So That's a very good question, an important question, because obviously to connect basic research with the clinical trials requires a variety of expertise in between. And researchers to some extent seek that because they realize that, but there's also parents' organizations again can play a very important role. First of all, by educating researchers who, surprisingly, those especially in basic science, may not exactly know what it takes to go from what is called from the bench side to bedside. One success story, for example, is known in the United States, where in fact again the DMD community was successful in arguing with Congress and enticing Congress to fund research for DMD, which now funds so-called Wellstone centers in a number of universities and also provides money directly for DMD, specifically designed for DMD. And I would encourage parents of children with other diseases that follow that successful path. And in fact, funding agencies or funding organizations such as parents' organizations can structure their grants such that they will require that basic researchers and the clinical researchers and the clinicians will work together to the goal to benefit the patients.